Well, welcome to the RTI Toolbox Series featuring RTiQ Remote Monitoring Service. We are extremely pleased to welcome you all here today. Vincent and I, we want to make sure that we provide you with the tools to be able to be successful each and every time, to make sure that you have ways to be able to create the ultimate systems, make sure that they work each and every time, and utilize the tools that we have available for you as a way to make sure to create the ultimate in satisfaction for your client each and every time, whether it's in use or you need to self-diagnose and troubleshoot. This is what this Toolbox series has been all about. So today's RTiQ remote monitoring, provides a simple yet powerful way to maintain and monitor your client's systems without having to roll a truck and saving you both just time and money. As we go through, I know you're going to have questions or have different scenarios. Please post those in the question answer section of the software so that we can make sure to get those answered. But we can also keep track of it so that we can develop future training information, dialogue with you, or bulletins or videos or whatever we might need to do down the road. So please put those questions that you do have in the question answer section, not the chat, but the question answer section so we get them on. Answered for you right away. My name is Tyler Nelson. I am the National Training Director for RTI, and Mr. Vincent Bova, my wonderful colleague, incredibly knowledgeable, is also on today. He'll be monitoring and providing additional insight as we go along today. So let's kick it off here real quick and get going into this. I want to make sure that we leave enough time for any questions that you may have. Now, when we're talking about RTI, we want to make sure that after today's session that you'll have knowledge on the following topics: the features and benefits of RTiQ, how to properly set up and program it, and being able to navigate RTiQ to ensure that system reliability. Now, there's other topics. Those are some pretty straightforward types of topics, but there's other areas within those topics that we'll get into that are going to be a little bit more detailed. So again, we will record this, and please post your questions. So that's what today's session is all about, those key topics in RTiQ. Now, let's kick it off right away. Let's just get right into it. RTiQ has a number of key features that will help you ensure successful client installations and experiences time and time again. And these can include everything from the web dashboard with the installed system map and current system issue window, the remote troubleshooting with direct command, macro, and trigger issuance availability, remote monitoring of Ethernet connected devices, both RTI and third party, being able to self-diagnose device issues through a root cause analysis with utilizing a detailed history log, even being able to receive real-time direct notifications to avert any client interruptions during use. And the best part about the whole remote monitoring service that we do offer is that it's free and it's easy to set up. You know how easy Integration Designer 11 is to program. Well, we want to make sure that all the tools that you do have are easy as well. So let's dive right into it and show you how this actually works. Now, when we're talking about setting up RTiQ for the first time, there's a couple of steps that I want to make sure that you are aware of before you start getting into the development of it. And the first step is to make sure that your company account is set up for RTiQ, that you've enabled that account. And to do this, we need you to send an email to RTI customer service at customerserve@rticontrol.com and request RTiQ activation for that account. Now, because RTiQ is an opt-in service, we don't have it automatically turn on when you set up your account initially. You do need to request it. And the only one that can request it and have it activated is the account administrator. So if you do have multiple people within your company that are going to be using RTiQ, you do have ways of setting up users within the RTiQ account. We have detailed information about how to set up users within the RTiQ user manual online on the website. But we want to make sure that you do get that set up right away by the company admin. Now, if you're not sure exactly how to get that set up, or you're not sure if you are, when you do log into the account, simply click on that resources button at the top, and then click on the RTiQ. Now, if it opens up right to RTiQ, your account's set up and you'll be ready to go. The RTiQ dashboard. If it doesn't, you will be provided a message informing you that you need to contact customer service in order to get your account activated. So it's a pretty simple way to be able to figure it out. And again, if you do have additional questions about that setup process, please let customer service know, let us know. We'll make sure to get you set up. That's the first step in getting your company set up to use RTiQ. The second step is a pretty straightforward one as well. That's enabling RTiQ within your Integration Designer project file. So you've opted into the service, and now you want to make sure that you're using with every project file. And again, we don't automatically do it. You do need to enable it for each individual program file. So let me switch over to a program file just to show you kind of what that looks like. So once you've opened up a program file within Integration Designer, you click on the XP6 or the XP processor, in the global area. And to the right, you'll see the processor configuration as well as the connected features. Under the connected features is settings. Upon clicking settings, you'll see two main areas, system name and RTiQ monitoring. Now, system name is the first one, and this one is very important to address. You want to make sure to name the system based on the client or the project. The reason for this is that this is what will be displayed on your dashboard and the system information. And if you have numerous systems, all that start with my system, you're not going to really know or be able to identify whose is whom's as you're looking at your dashboard simply. So this is an easier way to do it. So if you were to put a system name in, you could do something like RTiQ HQ Office or Tyler Office or whatever the case may be, whatever the project name is. That's the first step. Now, the second step is to be able to enable under the RTiQ monitoring by clicking in the checkbox. Upon clicking the enable monitoring, you'll see that the configure monitoring account does become active, and there's a status to the right of it saying not configured. In order to get this system ready to go for RTiQ monitoring, we just simply click on the configure monitoring account and enter in our RTiQ dealer site credentials. Upon doing so, and double check to make sure that it is correct, you'll see that the status has changed to configured. This system, upon being loaded into the program file or into the processor, will now be able to be monitored via RTiQ. It's that simple, folks. We really don't overcomplicate this at all. That's the step for getting it set up. Simple and easy. The third step in the process is configuring the devices for the monitoring. In this step, there's a couple of things I want to make sure you're aware of. The first part of this is, and here's a little pro tip for you, is to make sure that you add in all of your devices, all of your RTI control devices, all of your third-party control source devices into the project before going through and configuring the devices for monitoring for each and every one of them. We don't want to create extra work. One of the coolest parts about this, though, is that all the RTI Ethernet controlled devices, such as a KX10S or a KA11, will automatically be defaulted into being monitored by RTiQ. However, third-party source devices can be monitored in three different ways. So let's go back into Integration Designer real quick. So under the connected features, back into Integration Designer, you'll see RTiQ monitored devices. I've added in all of my control source devices as well as all the RTI devices. Upon clicking the RTiQ monitored devices, you'll see that we have a whole big list here of all the different things that we can do. And we can just simply start adding them. So if I click the word add, you'll see, okay, it's asking me, what do I want to name this device? What type of monitoring do I want to utilize? And based on that selection, how am I going to find it? How's RTiQ going to find it? Whether it's an IP address or a specific static IP or even a system variable. And we'll talk about this in a minute. And then the manufacturer, model number, serial, and firmware version. Well, in here, when we're ready to start adding in a specific device, for example, I could say the RTI 8064 as an example, or 8016X as an example here, I could select it from three different ways: IP, ping, and system variable. So what do each one of these do? Well, IP will give us a way to be able to monitor this device with a specific address and port that I would put into here. And this is typically used for monitoring those network devices that have connections to, say, web servers that need to, you want to make sure that that connection is there each and every time. Ping, however, is is generally used to monitor connections through a network ping to make sure that it's listened, that make sure that it's there, right? And it makes that constant connection. The third way is to use system variables. Now, system variables are very unique because this is used to monitor those devices controlled by the XP processor via a driver. Case in point, the RTI 8016X I'm using the 8064 driver to control it. Well, then I can use system variables, the system variable monitoring type, to be able to monitor it, the status of this device. Now, there's a couple of ways to think about this. This can be drivers that have things like connected or system status variables. You can use the system manager to be able to provide data. You can use RTiQ, you can use even flags to do so. And to be able to access those, we click on the variables tab here. And you'll see that they're all listed here. So for example, if I were to go down to the 8064, I could say, okay, if I want the connection status at the bottom here, and I want to know if device 1 is connected, I could monitor that. Now, this is very useful. And this monitoring utilizes what's called Boolean logic, or the true-false logic. For example, if we wanted to do this, the connection status of the 8064, and if we want to know if that's on or off, let me go back to it here real quick. Connection status, either on or off, or the device is connected, yes or no. This would provide that Boolean logic of true or false. True meaning yes, it is connected. False meaning no, it's not. So it's a way for us to be able to maintain that status and understand how that type of device is currently if it's currently operational or not. And it can be done on the single zones. If a source is selected, we could go into the system manager and decide, hey, is a room currently on or off? Is a music player selected? Is there certain layer visibility set up? How about IC real time? Is there currently, an alarm relay status scheduled or manual? So there's a lot of different ways that we can utilize variables to monitor the system and thus be able to help maintain that system, that system integrity, and make sure that it works each and every time. Now, another tip about this is that when you're going through this system and putting this information in, you do want to put in the specifics as well. I would highly recommend you do this because if you have multiple people within the company that are working on a system, or you're monitoring multiple devices in a system, there may be times where you need to be able to pull a specific part of that information. For example, if I have a couple of 8016Xs in a large scale project, I might need to make sure that I can pull and know what the serial numbers are or the model numbers are. Now, they're not, of course, required, but it is helpful information. So if I were to place this in here and select OK, now it will be monitored. That's as easy as being able to create these types of monitors. And you want to go through your list of the different drivers and different devices that you have to make sure that you are monitoring those, that you are putting the specific monitors in there. Another example might be if you're using a Wi-Fi thermostat, like the April Wi-Fi one might be, or wanting to maintain and make sure that that connection is solid all the time. The client keeps complaining about it not working or things of that nature. Well, that's a device that you could easily monitor to make sure that that connection is solid all the time. So with those types of monitoring, again, just to reiterate my point, you want to go through, create the entire project, and then go into RTiQ and be able to add in the specific devices, decide whether you need to maintain a ping, if you want to do a specific IP address, or if you want to be able to pull that system variable. And that system variable can be anything from system manager to a specific flag, to even being a very specific item, like if zone 1 mute is currently true or false. You have all those options available for you. So once you've got these set up, you've established the monitoring of all the different devices into the system, then you can go ahead and start creating your actions. So what do the actions do? Well, the actions are a very integral part of this, because what the actions allow you to do is create a macro that can be triggered remotely. If I were to click on RTiQ actions here, I can create a specific action that can be triggered remotely by clicking a button on the RTiQ dashboard for that specific system. So these macros can be as simple as a power toggle of an individual device, or as complex as a complete system reset that ensures all the devices are powered on and inputs are correctly routed. It's kind of up to you on how you want to build this type of macro sequence out. So for example, if I want to and I'll just do a simple one here real quick. If I want to do a rack streaming device power reset, let's say that I'm using that watt box that I have over here, and I want to be able to reset that outlet. Okay, so, and whatever device it is, we'll just say a streaming device, maybe a Roku player or something along those lines. Well, if I were to select that and create that action into here, you'll see that it places the category under the actions. The event is such, and it doesn't have a macro yet. Well, when I click on that now, you'll see that the button properties at the bottom does allow me to create said macro. So I could add a command in for that watt box and have the function being the streaming device reset, and I could do 1 as an example. So the first device, I want that to reset power outlet 1 in this case. And then you can create the additional actions that you might need, like the entire system reset. But this is a beautiful thing, because now on the RTiQ dashboard, which I'll show you in a moment, you would see a button similar to this, or you'll see a button similar to this that would allow us to launch that macro. As simple as this one is, sometimes when they do an update to a device, you just need to reset that outlet or turn it off, turn it on. And this might be a simple way to do that remotely for it. The important part about both the monitoring devices and the actions, think about when you're going into a project, what could happen and what you can do to prevent it now, rather than reacting to it. Be forward thinking about what are the devices that we're adding in that may have done some reading on that might need a power reset, or they live in a high storm area that we might need to do a full system reboot if necessary, or a system reboot. Things along those lines. You want to think forward instead of reacting every single time. So that's just my personal piece of advice for you on this. So let's keep going here, and let's talk about what the next part of this. So we've talked about the first two, which is the overall features, and then we've talked about setting up your devices and setting up your account, setting up the program file, and being able to create those devices and those actions, monitoring those devices and actions. But now you need to understand how to get to there, how to use the RTiQ control interface to be able to show, or to be able to monitor the project itself. So the focus areas of the RTiQ interface that I want to talk about today, the first one is going to be the dashboard. This is an overview of all your installations with status updates. As you can see from the map, you'll see that there's items in green, there's items in red and in yellow, but on the right-hand side, you'll see only a window that states current issues. Okay, so keep in mind that this right-hand side isn't going to list all of their systems. It's just going to list the ones that you need to take a look at or address. Anything that is currently with the green tag is no problem. Anything with yellow has one or more type of error detected. If you happen to see a blue one, that means that is in service mode. And there's more information about service mode in the user guide that we can talk about. And anything in red is that the system or the internet connection that the system is connected to is currently offline. As you can see here, the error versus offline. So again, the area to the right will only list the systems that have current issues. The area to the left is going to be an overall map of all of your installed systems. Now, if we were to click on our systems button at the top, you would see a list of all of your systems available. And now all of these systems are going to be listed regardless of status. As you can see, there's a variety of them in here, everything from okay as the green to offline to error messages. But the coolest part about this is that it can give you additional insight into those specific systems. We can really dive deep into them. For example, if we were to click on one of them, say the Adams residence, if I were to click on this Adams residence, it would pull up a specific detail. It would pull up the specific details about that specific system. And you can see all the information that's listed here. Everything from the type of, what the name of it is, the IP addresses, the models, how long it's been online, the amount of memory, how many times it's checked okay, and in terms of devices, if it has any errors on any additional devices. It will give you a ton of information. And we've broken it down by specific tabs at the bottom of this gray informational box. So for example, the devices tab being the first one is going to show all of the different RTI control devices and manually configured our third-party devices that RTiQ is monitoring on that specific system with the status, uptime, note, and IP address. And if we wanted to get specific details on it, we would just click on that specific area. And I'll show you that to you in just a minute. You also have an actions area, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and we'll show you where those actions that we created earlier would be. A notifications, which will show you all the different details that will show the relevant device information, such as firmware and type. And again, we'll show you this in just a moment. The settings area, where you can make sure that all of your systems are on that system overview map, as well as setting up dynamic DNS addresses. And then a history that will help you identify any sort of issues that you might be having with a specific device. Those are the main ones. Now, again, all the tabs are important, and the user guide will reference and go into detail on each one of those, but I want to show you these important ones first and foremost. So let's jump back into RTiQ here, and I'm just going to go to my home, partner home, and I'm going to go into resources and select RTiQ. And again, upon doing so of the map itself, where you can zoom in if you've got numerous projects in one singular area, like we would have here as an example, or you could zoom out to see an overall of all the projects you've worked on. The right-hand side being our current issues, any current issues that are currently working on the system itself. And one other thing I want to point out to you is that if you think we should add something, it would be nice if RTiQ did something specific. We've got a feedback area for you right here. Please provide feedback to us. Let us know if there's certain things that you think need to be added or certain areas that need to be included into this system. We're dealer first. We want to make sure that you have all the tools necessary. So please provide us that feedback. As I mentioned before, we've got our dashboard here, which gives us great information. If I click on the systems button, you'll see that there's all the systems available for me. And if I were to click on a specific one, say the Adams residence, there's all the information and all the information of all the devices. You'll also notice that the RTI control devices are also available in here, such as the KX7 in the foyer. If I were to click on that specific one, you'll see that there's all the information about it, the IP address, all the specific information. Let me go back here real quick. Now, in this specific area, we wanted to talk about not just the specific devices, but we wanted to talk about those specific tabs that are important. And one of the first ones being drivers. Within the drivers area, you'll notice a ton of information available for you. So in this is going to show you a list of all the drivers installed and the relative information regarding it, and can be used to remotely detect outdated drivers, monitor devices for any issues that might happen. If it seems to be drawing a lot of information, drawing a lot of CPU power, how much memory it's currently using. And you can see a ton of information in regards to that right here, as well as any expansion devices that you may have added in. So this is a great reference for you if a client says, well, my system seems really slow and it doesn't seem to be operating the way I want it to. This is a great spot to check right out of the gate, because you can see if there's a certain driver that seems to be revving up way too much or using a ton of memory that might be weighing down. Maybe I need to take that Kaleidoscape driver and move it to an expansion XP processor to offload a little bit of it in terms of the memory. Keep that in mind. This is a great location to check right out of the gate if you think if the complaint or if you think a system is not operating the way it should be optimally in terms of speed. The second area that I want to talk about is going to be the actions area. Now, remember how we talked about making those actions the power reset or being able to reboot a system? Well, here you go. You can directly reboot the processor. This one's always here right away from the RTiQ. You could reboot that processor on the fly. But these are those actions that we talked about being able to create right away for each one. So if I were to jump in Integration Designer, these actions that we're talking about here and how we develop those actions, that's what we're talking about in terms of pulling those up on RTiQ, issue those specific commands, whether it's an input cycle or rebooting something or display cameras on TV. You have a variety of options available to you right from this remote access area. That's where those actions are done. The notifications, we talked about that as being one of the key points. This is where we take a look at the system and we say, okay, how do I want to get that real-time information? How should I be notified if there's an issue? Well, here you go. You can easily do an email notification or even a text notification on these specific criteria. You can go through and be able to say, okay, if the system's offline, I want to get that. Or if there's a device error, I want to get that. Generally speaking, as you're going through and building these different and setting up these notification details, you kind of want to be careful. You don't want them all the time, right? Because generally, you're getting a lot of information all the time. Well, if it's a lot of emails that are constantly coming in about a device going offline and then a device coming back online, or if devices goes offline and then recovers, and then there's a daily report, or if there's an IP change. What we recommend you do, if the system's offline, I would keep that checked. If the system recovery is back online, I would keep that checked, because you want to know if it's offline or online and be able to make sure that if something's going on or something's triggering. If there's an IP change, now if you don't set up any sort of static IP addresses or you haven't gone through and really reserved a whole bunch of stuff, if there's a specific IP change, you probably should be notified about that, because sometimes that might mean one of those devices that you're controlling via IP, well, you might not have control over it anymore. So it would be very wise to keep that one checked. The daily report, I always recommend it because it's nice to have. It's nice to know that every day I can see that my systems are in good shape. And then the final one is the calm report. So what is the calm report? Well, the calm report gives us basically all is good. I don't get all the different devices, all the information all the time. It is a very straightforward way to be able to say everything seems to be operating the way it is. Instead of having device error, device recovery, all that kind of fun stuff, it's a very simple way to just know everything works. And again, you can do that for text messages as well. Now, settings. This is the next part that is important. You do want to put in the address information here. And the reason I say you want to put that in is because on the dashboard, if I go back here real quick, you'll see that if I were to click on, say, a specific one, there's the Adams residence, you see that there's the address, but it can only be placed here if we have that information. Well, that information is placed in there based on you putting it into that specific settings area under that specific system. So make sure to put that information in there so that you have it on your overall dashboard. And then the final one is going to be the history. And the history is a very vital piece. And the reason I say it's a very vital piece is because it will give you information about what is going on in that system. So if I were to click on, say, this Integra receiver and go to the history of it, it would essentially show me all the information about when it was offline, when it was online. And you can search specific things. So if I were to type in Integra and hit enter there, it would pull up all the Integra records, or the Denon, or the Kaleidoscope, and you would see, and you could be able to self-diagnose what is currently happening in the system, or if there's a client that says, this X, Y, and Z item isn't working the way it should be. It won't maintain connection, or I keep losing it, the cameras keep going off, whatever the case may be. This will give you a running log of all that information. And this is important because as you start to work into the self-diagnoses of a system and you start getting more and more detailed information about these, and you starting to dive in, if you do call into tech support and you can pull up a full-on report about history of a specific device or an item, system errors in the past 12 months as an example. There's the item residence that it pulled up, and let me show you an example of what that report might be like. That's all based on, say, the device errors in the history, and it gives us a lot more information to work with here. So RTiQ in itself is very, very versatile. It gives us a lot of information about the devices, about the system itself, but even more so gives us the ability to not have to roll a truck out to reboot the processor or issue a command or reset the entire system with routing and being able to control the entire all aspects of that system for the most part to get it back to where the client is happy, it works, it's online, and they're fully satisfied each and every time. So I know that was a lot of information, but the keys for you today is to understand those features and benefits, what's available to you. Make sure to give us feedback about what you're looking for. Make sure that you understand the steps it takes to properly set up and configure the system, activate your company, enable and name the system in the Integration Designer project file, configure those source devices after you've added them all to the project, and create actions for the remote testing and the resets that might be needed. Forward thinking, folks, that's the name of the game here. We want to make sure that we're taking precaution, but also making sure that our clients are satisfied all the time, and then being able to understand the navigation of the RTiQ interface and how it works and where to locate that data. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of extra information available for you with the user manual that goes into depth and detail on each one of those areas. And I would invite you to go and take a look at that. In fact, let me show you exactly where it is. If I were to go back to the dealer site, go under resources, support, and then go under the technical support docs, technical bulletins, it will be under the RTiQ user guide. So again, it's under the support, technical support docs, technical bulletins, and the RTiQ user manual. And again, this gives us a lot more detailed information, but from this webinar today, I feel you have a great understanding of the process it takes to get yourself set up with it, where the important parts are in terms of setting it up and configuring it, and how to navigate that. So with that, I want to go ahead and open it up to questions.
I do have some questions, if you don't mind me going over them.
No, please go ahead.
The first question I had was a really good one. Someone wanted us to go more in depth of setting up one of the error reporting for IP versus ping. And I'd love to explain that if you want to go and navigate to the tab again. So let's start with ping, which is really basic. What ping allows you to do is ping a device that's reliant on the control system. So let's say, for example, your client has a network attached storage drive that he's using with RTI Music. Maybe you want to, there's no driver for it, so you can't monitor connection variables, but what you can do is make sure that that device is online by entering its IP address. So you'll go and enter in the IP address of that device along with the cosmetic information, just so it makes more sense for you down the line. And that will give you a good idea. Another thing you could do is any device that isn't being controlled directly through a driver, but is reliant on being up. Maybe you're controlling with IR, but it does need to be up on the network. So that's ping. Port communication, or IP, is going to be one level more. In that situation, you're going to monitor things that use port communication. For example, here's a common scenario. We all have clients that love to swap out routers without telling you. You own the network until they decide they're going to swap out their internet provider and thus probably swap out your router. In that situation, your camera feeds, which have already been port forwarded and are using a port for communication, are going to default. So in this situation, you would enter in the camera, NVR, the IP address of the NVR or camera, and the port of the camera or NVR. And if that communication is lost, you'll be able to get an alert. Also, just to tackle another question that's here in this window, if you could just go back to that window real quick. Or disabled. For example, sometimes you want to monitor the system, maybe find out if a specific input is selected or if something else is going on, a certain scenario. But you don't necessarily want an error log if it's not set to that setting. So in that case, you would disable it so you could still see it, the status in your dashboard, but not get error logs when they come and happen. So there's an example of IP versus ping. Also, a lot of other drivers have port communication, receivers. If you don't know the port, check the driver. They usually have the ports. Another question, I just jot these down. Someone asked, what's the difference between the driver diagnostics, or the XP diagnostics, I should say, and the driver configuration tab in RTiQ on where you're monitoring all the CPU usage? That's a good question. XP diagnostics is not very useful when the processor goes down. The great thing about RTiQ is that it will store those values in the cloud. So let's say the processor goes down and you go check RTiQ first before rebooting anything, you'll be able to see the last CPU used in RTiQ, not XP diagnostics. So having that information stored should be in the driver tab. Having that information stored, that CPU last and memory last, is a great advantage to the driver configuration versus XP diagnostics. Another thing, here it is. Someone asked about DNS. If you go to your settings, when you configure your account, you're going to set up a DNS account. The good news is RTI will give you a free DNS account. Usually it's the name of the address of the client or an iteration of that, followed by their street address. So house number and street address. The manual goes into that. And you'll get a free DNS account. The great part about that is not only can you use that to remotely monitor RTiQ, but you could use it as a DNS address for your RTI panel devices so your client can have remote access. That's a fantastic feature, and it'll save you some money. That's pretty much it. Another question is coming in. We have customers that when their router is rebooted, the house receives a new IP address and RTiQ loses communication until the processor is rebooted on site. Can the IP address be updated more regularly? Has that been called into tech support? Because I don't know how often it refreshes, but it is a DNS address, so it should readdress that IP address change pretty regularly. We can look into what's going on with that if that's a problem. But we ask anyone that has an issue like that to let our tech support team know so we can gather some metrics on it.
To Vincent's point, the user guide does go into detail on each one and does get a little bit more thorough in terms of how each one is used. We just don't have the time to be able to go through each one today, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about the major points, the go-to ones that you would need right off the bat to get going. And it's an incredible feature that we do offer from RTI. Any other questions out there at all? All right, well, everybody, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Hope this helped you give it an idea of what RTiQ can do, how it can help you ensure full customer satisfaction each and every time. And if you do have additional questions, feel free to send us a note or let us know. We're happy to help in any way we can. With that, on behalf of Vincent, myself, and the rest of the RTI team, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.